The first sign that something was wrong came long before the encounter itself, long before the moment I froze in my own backyard, staring into the tree line at a massive silhouette that shouldn't have existed. For weeks, there had been whispers in the woods at night, strange movement in the brush, and a constant feeling that something was watching me from just beyond where the porch light could reach. I brushed it off at first, blaming raccoons, wind, maybe a stray deer wandering close. But deep down, I knew these sounds were different. They had weight, intention, and a strange rhythm that matched no animal I knew. I live on a quiet stretch of land, acres of trees, rocky slopes, and thick undergrowth that seem endless when the sun goes down. Most nights, the silence is comforting. But on that evening, something felt off the moment I stepped outside. The air was too still. Even the insects were quiet. The silence had an unnatural heaviness to it, as if the entire forest were holding its breath. I was checking the perimeter fence after hearing metallic clanking earlier. I thought a storm had loosened something. But as I reached the far end of the yard, it wasn't the fence that made my chest tighten, it was the low, rumbling growl coming from the dark. It wasn't loud, it wasn't aggressive, but it was deep, so deep it vibrated through the ground and into my legs. I stopped mid-step, listening. The growl faded, then the forest fell silent again. I told myself it had to be a bear. That was the most logical explanation. But logic only carries you so far when you can't shake the feeling that you're being studied. I headed back, a little faster than I'd care to admit, and locked the door behind me. I tried to convince myself that I was overreacting. Yet for hours afterward, I couldn't focus on anything else. The sound replayed in my mind over and over, too long, too steady, too controlled for a bear. It sounded like a warning. Later that night, just as I was about to turn off the lights, I heard something else, 3 heavy knocks echoing from deep within the woods. Sharp, deliberate, like someone striking wood with a large piece of timber. Knock, a pause, knock, another pause, longer this time. Then the third knock. I knew enough about the woods to understand that no animal made sounds like that. The knocks were purposeful, coordinated. And strangely, they didn't feel threatening. They felt communicative, as if whatever had made them wasn't trying to scare me, but alert me. Still, I didn't sleep much that night. In the morning, things got stranger. I found large footprints, massive ones, pressed deep into the soft dirt near the tree line. At first glance, they looked almost human, but far too long, far too wide. And there were no claw marks, which ruled out bears. The stride was enormous. Something tall had been pacing just beyond the yard, watching. I measured one print with a stick. Nearly 20 inches. I should have been terrified, but instead, I was overwhelmed by curiosity. I wanted answers. That evening, just before sundown, I grabbed a flashlight and walked out to the edge of the trees. The woods were peaceful again, filled with the usual chirping and rustling. I took a few steps into the brush, scanning the ground for more prints. Then I heard it, a heavy exhale, like a deep sigh from something with lungs bigger than any animal I'd ever imagined. It came from behind a cedar tree only a few yards away. My heart slammed into my chest. I raised the flashlight, but the beam flickered weakly. Another exhale, closer. I backed away slowly, hardly breathing. When I reached the yard, I turned and hurried inside. I didn't dare look over my shoulder. That night, the knocking returned, this time closer. 3 heavy hits, followed by silence. A part of me wondered if something in the forest was trying to warn me again. Warn me about what? I had no idea. It wasn't until 2 nights later that everything changed. It was just after 2 a.m. I woke up to a loud crash outside, metal scraping against the ground. I jumped out of bed and ran to the window. My shed door was swinging open, dangling broken from its hinges. Something had smashed it in. But stranger still, whatever had done it wasn't rummaging through anything. It wasn't stealing feed or tools. It wasn't even inside. Instead, I saw movement, shadows shifting low to the ground, near the far side of the yard. Something was crawling under the fence. Small shapes, fast-moving, coyotes, a whole pack, more than I'd seen around here in years. They were slipping onto my property like they owned it, their eyes glowing faintly in the moonlight. My gut twisted. Coyotes don't usually move in like that unless pushed. They were frightened, running from something. I backed away from the window, unsure whether to grab a weapon or stay put. Before I could decide, a sound erupted from the woods that froze me in place, a loud, bone-shaking roar. Not a bear, not a mountain lion. Something deeper, more primal. The sound rolled through the trees and hit the yard like a shockwave. The coyotes scattered instantly, yelping and sprinting back into the woods as if hell itself were chasing them. I stared, stunned. Something had just protected my property, something powerful enough to send a full pack of coyotes fleeing like terrified pups. Then the forest went quiet again. I forced myself to the window once more. My eyes adjusted, scanning for movement. And then I saw it. A silhouette, towering behind the line of trees. It was massive, wide shoulders, long arms, and a head that nearly brushed the lower branches. It wasn't hunched like a bear. It wasn't slinking like a big cat. It stood upright, perfectly still, perfectly silent. I should have screamed. I should have backed away. But I didn't. Instead, I stepped closer to the glass. The figure didn't move. It didn't approach. It simply observed, watching the woods, watching the direction the coyotes had run. And then, slowly, it turned its head in my direction. My breath stopped. Even from that distance and in the dark, I could feel its presence, calm, deliberate, intelligent. We stared at each other for what felt like minutes. Then it did something I will never forget. It raised its arm, not quickly, not threateningly, just a slow, intentional lift. A gesture, as if acknowledging me, or reassuring me, and then it stepped back, swallowed by the darkness between the trees. I stood there long after it disappeared, my mind racing, heart pounding, trying to process what I had just seen. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I paced the living room, replaying the moment over and over again. The coyotes, the roar, the silhouette, the gesture, whatever it wasn't trying to hurt me. It was protecting my property. Over the next few days, I paid close attention to everything around the house. More footprints appeared, some fresh, some overlapping older ones. Always by the tree line, never too close to the house. As if whatever was out there wanted me to know it was still watching over the place. I stopped hearing the coyotes altogether. The strange knocks continued occasionally, but they no longer felt ominous. They felt like signals, check-ins, a presence just beyond the woods, making itself known but never crossing the line. One evening, just before dusk, I stepped outside with a flashlight. I didn't wander into the woods, but I stood at the edge, looking into the shadows. "I know you're out there," I said softly. "Thank you." It sounded ridiculous, talking to the trees. But the forest responded, not with words, not with movement, but with a quiet, profound stillness. A feeling of being acknowledged. From that night on, everything changed. I no longer felt alone on the property. I no longer feared whatever watched me from the woods. If anything, I felt protected. Guarded by something ancient, something powerful, something that most people believe is just a myth. But myths don't leave 20-inch footprints. Myths don't scare off predators with a single roar. Myths don't stand in the moonlight and raise a hand in silent understanding. I know what I saw. And I know now, Bigfoot wasn't just passing through. It was guarding my land. Protecting it, and protecting me. To this day, the forest behind my home feels alive in a way it never did before. As if something walks its paths each night, patrolling the shadows, keeping an ancient watch over a place it has silently claimed as part of its territory. Maybe someday I'll see it again. Maybe someday it'll step out of the trees and reveal itself fully.